Hey YouTube, Awesome Writer here, and this is effectively going to be my review of the most recent episode of Gotchard, which is episode 20, which I was planning and not planning on doing a video, because I actually thought Valvarad's writer form was going to debut this week, and he didn't. I was impressed. They showed restraint. He's going to debut next week, and of course they got to show it in the trailer, but I was surprised. But I had a lot of thoughts, and I'm like, you know what, to hell with it. Let's make a video, because it's been a slow time. And I had, like I said, a lot of thoughts. I thought about recording my thoughts on their own first and jamming the videos together, but I'm like, do we need a 20-minute Gotchard video? And I want to be clear that, like I've said in past videos, I think the show is much more enjoyable. There isn't anything necessarily super unique about it, but it is much more enjoyable because I'm going to be bringing up a lot of grievances, but I'm still enjoying it. But I'll say that, like, compared to the purgatory of filler where it was, like, legit tough to get through, this has at least been entertaining to watch. And I do have a lot of thoughts and criticisms going off, but other than wanting to punch Hotaro in the face, I'm not overly mad at the show. A lot of criticisms nailed down, and I don't want to seem like I'm being overly negative, but the show is much more enjoyable to watch while I'm criticizing them before, if that makes any sense. So basically, again, this is like the first part of Valvarad's debut as a writer, which I've said before, I have mixed thoughts on. I feel this whole, like, transition from him as a writer-esque thing to a writer seems unnecessary here. It also brings up my annoyance at the fandom's need for categorization, and it just also just doesn't make any sense. I mean, he basically was a writer. It's dumb. His suit looks like a writer. He behaved like a writer. I mean, I know that there's this whole thing about, like, you're a writer if you have a driver, I guess, but I don't know. It's stupid, and it's not as if within this series and the franchise themselves, there's some sort of standard about, like, being able to call yourself a Kamen writer. We literally have Kamen Rider Dread, who's a villain. It just seems dumb. In the past, you know, I've used the example of when this has been used before. The one that makes the most sense is, like, Chaser. Machine Chaser. It was kind of about an arc and about him breaking free of being controlled as Machine Chaser. And then Build kind of had the best of both worlds in terms of a bad example and a good example, where Night Rogue was also used to show his redemption when he became Rogue. But then you have Bloodstalk, who became a villain writer. So, I don't know. It just seems stupid. And also, all the stuff with him being like, oh, I'm not as good as our main protagonist. Why am I not as good? I'm like, dude, you're better. This dude is straight up pathetic. That storyline about the badass, like, second rival character feeling inferior to the specialist boy is, like, one of the most overdone tropes, and it's annoying and overdone in general, but especially with Hotaro, because not only do I not like him, but setting aside my personal dislike, in my opinion, other than the fact that, of course, his main motivation is, like, the noble, I guess, motivation of wanting chemis to work with humans, I don't feel like they've shown me on screen any reason why he should be followed or coveted or why he's strong, and he actually has got his ass handed to him several times. So regardless, I just don't buy it, and I find that to be all terribly generic. And there's also stuff with, like, Hotaro and Rin being like, oh, we gotta save him, and especially Hotaro. Of course, the generic protagonist is gonna be like, we gotta save everyone, chemis! I don't feel like there's been a moment between Hotaro and him that has shown, like, any sort of respect. Like, with this type of dynamic, you usually have them hating on each other, or the arrogant character hating on the main character, but there's, like, maybe a few moments that are going to hint at a future frenemy relationship, but I feel like that's not there yet. I mean, obviously, Hotaro's operating on Toku protagonist autopilot, but I still didn't buy it. And there's also dramatic moments later when, like, the parents are being attacked, and he's like, help him, and there's, like, slow-mo and dramatic music, and I'm like, they have not done any work in this series to make me care about this moment. Like, I feel numb to this. You could all get dusted right now, and I'd be like, should we go for lunch? Celebrate? Talking about the meat and potatoes of the plot. I don't know why I said it that way. That was weird. Basically, you have this scene, or these set of scenes that run parallel, where Spanner's parents come back, and they're like, oh, his parents are back from a visit. But at the same time as that's happening, you have his friend coming to visit Hotaro and the gang to get help with the driver, and she's explaining to them, yeah, his parents are dead. And so at first I was confused, because it's like, Spanner doesn't seem like the type of character that wouldn't question his dead parents coming back. Like, I've seen this story before where a dead relative or loved one comes back and the person doesn't want to question it because they're just happy, but Spanner doesn't seem like the type of person to be like, oh, you're finally back from the dead! I mean, what took you so long? Like, the whole thing reminded me of that scene of Parks and Rec when Andy's being questioned for his police interview and they're like, what would you do if you had to pull your father over for a ticket? And he's like, first of all, I'd be like, Dad, you're alive? What the hell? And we find out later that his memory was actually erased by his friend, which is super interesting, especially because I think that they had that one episode very early on where he was very strict about the rule of memory erasure with the Alchemy Academy, and they keep bringing up this memory thing way more than I thought they were going to, and I'm really curious if it's going to amount to anything. But it made for a really interesting dynamic between his past with his friend here, whose name I can't remember. You know I'm really bad at the names, but she's new, so give me a break. Regardless, I watch so many shows that, like, all the Toku side characters, I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to care about ever learning your names. I I do have to say though, I really like this character. She might be one of my favorite characters so far. That might seem like an over-exaggeration. It's not like she's making my top 10 list or anything, but she feels like one of the most genuine characters in the show, and I really like her dynamic with Spanner, and it's been on so short, but it's made me feel like Spanner's more a part of the show. I really believe their dynamic, and I think her performance feels the most genuine and likable, and she feels like one of the characters in the series that most feels like an actual person, as I feel like the performances and the characters in the series overall have not been the best. Like, obviously, you know, I don't like Hotaro. I just don't think the actor does a good job at this character. I mean, I don't like that type of character in general, but at least there's been ones in the past where, even though I hate that annoying honk in your face, annoying, optimistic character, at least the performance is like, you're at least doing a good job at annoying me. Everybody else is either just really flat. Like, Spanner is fine, Rin's relatively flat, the other cast members are forgettable, and I gotta say, our new villain, Greymon without a Mon, I feel he's also in that same range where he kind of plays a sinister, slightly campy villain, but I feel like the actor isn't quite giving it his all, so it comes off as like just not that great of a performance. So this character feels like the only decent performance in the show so far, and that's probably one of my favorite things about this new era. Lots of stuff going on with those reveals about the memories, and you find out about the past where it was actually Greymon without a Mon that opened the gate. I guess Spanner witnessed it all, and he has the secret potential power that comes out in black flames, and they just talk about how it comes from his potential with alchemy. I hope that there's more of an explanation from that. And it is funny about how much of this just is popping out of thin air. I talked about in the previous videos how all this feels like they really are doing a refresh and they acknowledge things weren't working, but it's insane how many things happening right now feel like they had absolutely no preamble. They're just completely being thrown in here out of thin air. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate that there's a lot more going on, but it feels out of left field compared to another series where they'll do something like this and I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember them hinting at that episodes ago. That establishes that he has like this secret dark power that the villain is trying to bring out via the scheme by bringing his parents back and then killing them again, or killing them or whatever. It was kind of interesting though that the parents were like, I don't think it was actually them. This angel villain sort of brought a version of them back. Speaking of the monster, the design in this has been really great. Like, Spanner's monster form looked awesome. The angel form looked awesome, although the tiny head freaked me out a little bit. I thought it was interesting that the parents, whether they were really them resurrected or not, they weren't like in on it, where suddenly they like turn around and have like an evil smile, like I was working with the villain all along, like they truly thought they were his parents. Anyway, they use that to bring out his darkness and he becomes Amalgam. I didn't see this part coming. Now, I don't look at all of the early press photos or the descriptions, so honestly, just based on the show's pacing, that's why I was surprised that I assumed that he was going to transform into Valvarad this week before I even knew the plot. Even when he started, like, I thought that he was going to overcome this past and his past trauma and transform into Valvarad right when he transformed into the monster. And then even once he transformed into the monster, I thought that after he got a pep talk from his friend, he was going to overcome it and transform into Valvarad at the end. I was pleasantly surprised that it didn't go that way, that it was a two-parter. I thought it was a nice little twist, and even though we know, obviously, he's going to be there next week or form, I thought this could have been a nice little mini arc, kind of like with Dread. It's like you set up something kind of interesting that could have been an interesting status quo change for 4 or 5 episodes, but I was at least impressed that it didn't go the way I thought, and even though it's a lot of generic as hell stuff, they're giving a little more depth to Spanner. Last thing I want to touch on just in regards to talking about this is getting ready to watch the episodes. It's insane how we're 20 episodes in. I mean, I suppose sort of a lot has happened because we introduced so many forms for the first 15 episodes, and we're now in this like season 2 era where we're setting up stuff, but it also doesn't feel like we're 20 episodes in. It also feels like so little has happened. I think in a lot of ways it's because of how shallow the show is, but also because this new era almost feels like the actual beginning of the show, setting up writers and actual plot, whereas the beginning of the show, outside of the general premise, it didn't set up a whole lot out of, there's a bunch of forms, and man, I was like really almost like sort of almost halfway through, and it's crazy. Again, slow time, I wanted to talk about it because I was surprised about how this went down, and again, I gotta say, I have a lot of little problems and nitpicks and notes and stuff, but outside of Hotaro, the show has been at least a lot more enjoyable. It's a lot more to enjoy for review purposes, so I do appreciate that. And if someone was early on in writer, I could see them enjoying the show, especially if they're not annoyed by Hotaro, because I don't think the show is great. And I still think Hotaro is awful for a lot of people, which I see. But, you know, I do bring with the experience of watching Toku for so long that so many things I've already seen, like a lot of the stuff annoys me because I'm like, I've already seen this plot like 5 times and I don't like this type of protagonist. So after the 15th year of seeing it, you're more annoyed. So I could see someone enjoying this if this was their first writer. And I have to say, in this episode, Hotaro really wasn't all that present, so the episode was even more enjoyable because he wasn't there to drag the episode down so much. But yeah, I was actually kind of impressed that they decided to let this episode breathe a little bit. What did you think of this in the beginning of Valvarad's story and some of these revelations? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps, ring that bell. So you can get notifications for my videos. Dawson Writer, signing out.